The coronavirus has hit Italy worse than any other country, with a death toll higher than China's, and the numbers are still climbing. Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has called it the most difficult crisis since World War II.
Non è la prima volta che il nostro paese si trova ad affrontare emergenze nazionali, ma siamo un paese forte, un paese che non si arrende. È nel nostro DNA.
Italy's first case was recorded in late January when 2 Chinese tourists tested positive in Rome, and the first locally transmitted outbreak occurred in Lombardy, Italy's most populated and wealthiest region.
Nella giornata del 20 è stata rinvenuta al proprio domicilio una signora di 77 anni deceduta, che è morta, una persona di 77 anni che aveva, tutta una serie di sue patologie. A questa persona post mortem per scrupolo è stato fatto un tampone e il tampone è risultato positivo.
Having seen what happened in China, people in the affected areas braced themselves, unsure of the severity of what was coming.
Ma tutti abbiamo paura, poi incrociamo le mani, speriamo, certamente, se uno veramente si sente poco bene dovrebbe in qualche modo intervenire un po' prima, perché in effetti le persone possono essere curate. È chiaro che se uno si presenta in ospedale quando ormai è in una condizione disperata, è chiaro che a quel punto curarlo è molto più problematico.
Only days after the outbreak, 11 municipalities were placed under quarantine. The worst affected regions were designated red zones, with the population placed in complete isolation. In yellow zones, the neighbouring areas, schools and public venues were closed.
Nelle aree individuate come focolai non sia consentito l'ingresso e l'allontanamento, salvo eventuali specifiche deroghe poi consentite e valutate di volta in volta.
The police and army were deployed to checkpoints, and anybody trying to leave faced a fine of over $200 and possibly 3 months in prison. With the quarantine in place, the rest of Italy initially tried to get on with life as before. Fearing the impact on the economy and tourism, Conte gave personal assurances that it was business as usual.
Che in Italia è un paese sicuro, è un paese su cui si può viaggiare, si può venire a fare del turismo. Ci sono alcune aree delimitatissime del nostro territorio che in questo momento abbiamo assoggettato a delle restrizioni per quanto riguarda anche la circolazione di persone, ma sul restante territorio si può viaggiare tranquillamente.
Indeed, in late February, tourists were still a common sight in Rome and Milan, and at this stage, public opinion was actually divided about the lockdown in Lombardy.
In realtà penso sia una misura troppo restrittiva, cioè chiudere la regione Lombardia del tutto mi sembra una reazione troppo forte.
Anche perché abbiamo visto i dati recenti di persone positive che hanno infranto la quarantena, sono andati a sciare in una casa di proprietà in Trentino, adesso non mi ricordo dove. Ma ragazzi, ma stiamo scherzando? Ma che egoismo è questo? Quindi a questo punto sì, forse queste misure sono necessarie.
But by early March, the number of confirmed cases started accelerating so rapidly that Conte's administration realized hospitals were in danger of being overwhelmed.
Significa che finché i numeri sono bassi, il sistema sanitario nazionale può assistere efficacemente i contagiati, ma in caso di crescita esponenziale è evidente che non solo l'Italia, ma nessun paese al mondo potrebbe affrontare una simile situazione di emergenza.
By mid-March, Italy had more active cases than the next 2 most affected countries together. And on March the 19th, it registered more deaths than China, making it the worst affected nation by what was now being called a global pandemic. Initially, Rome had reacted quickly, cancelling all flights to China and declaring a state of emergency by January the 31st. The first quarantines were in place earlier than in some other countries. So what was going wrong? The nation's social and demographic models were playing against it. The elderly are particularly vulnerable, and Italy has the second oldest population in the world, as several generations of a family often live together or are frequently in contact. The virus is easily transmitted to the elderly. In spite of Italy having one of the highest ratios of intensive care beds and doctors per capita in Europe, and northern Italy's hospitals in particular being among the best resourced in the world, they were reaching breaking point.
What we think is that at European level we need a coordination. Not every country, not every region will need masks in the same moment. If we have a European coordination, everyone can give a better solution to the problem we have.
Italy requested help through the EU emergency response mechanism, but no member states came forward. Finally, on March the 22nd, the EU Commission released $54 million for the production of ventilators and personal protective equipment. Russia, China and Cuba sent medical supplies and personnel, while Rome asked for assistance from US military staff based in Italy. As the virus spread beyond Lombardy, Rome began to implement nationwide isolation measures. Schools had already been closed in early March.
Sapete che in queste ore c'era una valutazione in corso sulla possibilità di chiudere o meno le scuole. Per il governo non è stata una decisione semplice, abbiamo aspettato anche il parere del Comitato Tecnico Scientifico e abbiamo deciso prudenzialmente, visto che la situazione epidemiologica cambia velocemente, di sospendere le attività didattiche al di fuori della zona rossa.
Learning institutions across the country remained closed. Likewise, all sports, social, entertainment and religious gatherings were indefinitely suspended. Even the Pope cancelled his Sunday addresses in favour of streaming them online from inside the Vatican. On March the 8th, the outright quarantine was expanded to all of Lombardy and 14 northern provinces. Then the following day, to all of Italy.
È per questo che sto per firmare un provvedimento che possiamo sintetizzare con l'espressione "io resto a casa". Non ci sarà più una zona rossa, non ci sarà più la zona 1 e la zona 2 della penisola. Ci sarà l'Italia, un'Italia zona protetta.
By this stage, much of the country resembled a ghost town. With a break from continual pollution, Venice's canals ran clear for the first time in living memory. But the economy was suffering, and the stock market had lost 40% of its value. Small businesses were going under, prompting the government to suspend loans and mortgage payments, as well as provide funds for employers to pay their staff.
E abbiamo appena deliberato lo stanziamento di una somma straordinaria, 25 miliardi, consapevoli delle difficoltà che il Paese sta affrontando per questa emergenza.
Even as the economic effects of the lockdown took their toll, the health situation continued to deteriorate. On March the 21st, Italy announced the largest number of deaths in a single day in any country up to that point. In the worst affected cities, like Bergamo, doctors were routinely having to choose between those who were most likely to live or die.
A volte bisogna fare un bilancio tra quelle che sono le possibilità di successo e le condizioni reali dei pazienti. Quindi si cerca di dare il meglio a tutti, dando qualcosa di più a chi ha più chance.
And as the bodies mounted, mortuaries were unable to cope.
Si lavora a ciclo continuo, abbiamo chiesto aiuto anche ad imprese di pompe funebri di altre regioni, sono arrivate dall'Emilia, da Trento, per darci soccorso. Però insomma, diciamo che questo non voglio aggiungere particolari macabri.
Eventually, even the logistics of burying the dead became unmanageable, and the army was drafted to remove coffins from Bergamo. With few tools left at the government's disposal, Prime Minister Conte announced the closure of all economic activity not involved in the fight against the virus.
Oggi abbiamo deciso di compiere un altro passo. La decisione assunta dal governo è quella di chiudere nell'intero territorio nazionale ogni attività produttiva che non sia strettamente necessaria, cruciale, indispensabile a garantirci beni, servizi essenziali.
Pharmacies, grocery stores, supermarkets and some banks and post offices remained open, But the isolation measures have not been completely successful. Police have charged more than 50,000 people with violating the lockdown. The head of a Chinese Red Cross delegation was unimpressed by either Italy's restrictions or the people's compliance.
但我很快发现了问题，因为我刚从帕多瓦过来。米兰是我们意大利国内疫情最重的一个城市，但是我发现这里的封锁令或者管控令。
At the same time, doctors in Bergamo have said the situation remains critical. Patient numbers continue to increase by the hour, and some medical staff are showing symptoms and self-isolating.
We are in full emergency with this coronavirus pandemic. Our health personnel, nurses and physicians are working round the clock, countless hours to fight this incredible situation. We do not know how long this pandemic will last. I have two messages. The first one is for the general population. Please stay at home. The second message is for whoever wants to help us. We are in desperate need of both nurses and physicians.
While many more deaths are anticipated, thousands of people have pulled through after spending several days in intensive care. Hotels are being converted into recovery centres where patients can be monitored for further symptoms before being allowed to go home.
Gli ospiti sono tutti provati perché è un'esperienza. Immaginate affrontare la morte in faccia, combattere ogni giorno per sopravvivere, vedere amici, conoscenti, compagni di questa sventura non farcela e arrivare a questo punto ti lascia sicuramente il segno.
World leaders are watching to see when Italy's fatalities peak. What lessons can they learn from its experience? And when the country as a whole recovers, what scars will be left? In the meantime, Italians sing on, an act of courage and one of gratitude and support to the medical professionals who are fighting to save so many lives.
Bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao.